6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I believe we are live. This is Micah McCurry Live number 38 with a friend of mine, Keith Putnam, soon to be already missionaries to Brazil. How you doing, man?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. We were just talking a few moments ago, and I try to keep the chit chat to a minimum beforehand, only because I end up talking about so much fun stuff off air. That would be such good radio. And so
I don't think the things we were talking about. I don't think that's broadcastable. Not for anything wicked wrong. Just
right.
So
yeah, I think we started at the right time.
I agree.
So those of you, if you want, maybe I'll sign up for like a Patreon account, and we can have like a behind the scenes, or like a real behind the scenes, and so people support. Then maybe then we can really air that. Exactly. So Keith Putnam, for folks who might not know who you are, give us a quick rundown, as long as you like, but just tell us who you are and how you got to where you are.
Absolutely. So again, my name is Keith, and my family, my wife Jamie, and our two children, Elena and Clayton, and we're the Putnams. We are on deputation right now. We're traveling and going around. We've been traveling for just a little over 2 years on deputation, and headed to the country of Brazil. And the Lord called me when I was 9. And so we've been planning this for a long time. We're excited to finally be on our way. We're about 93, 95%, somewhere in there, support coming in. Mm-hmm. And got some meetings. We'll be traveling through right before Christmas. And then, Lord willing, we'll be on our way in February, second week of February. So we're getting close, and we are excited and ready to be wrapping up. So Lord's been good.
Amen. Yeah. So how long on deputation then?
No. Our first meeting was September 10th, 2017. So we're at just a little at 25 months. We were in Brazil on our survey trip last August for a month, and then a couple of weeks off when our son was born. So in traveling just about 2 years when it's all said and done.
Praise the Lord. Yeah. So, and from talking to you previous, and we'll get into this in just a little bit, but I know you've been hitting it hot and heavy. But being able to wrap that up in 2 years, I'm sure is the answer to prayer, but also shows that you were again hitting it hard, and so that's awesome. So the call to Brazil, we'll jump into all that in just a second. I'll just give a little bit of my background with you. I think we we did overlap when I got my master's at Providence for a year. I was there for a year for that, and so we were there due to work schedules and stuff like that. We didn't cross paths a whole lot or anything, but it's fun. I was talking about with Bradley Kubik, missionary to Mongolia, the very last interview. I was talking to him about how the fact that we were in college together for I think 3 years at Golden State, and high and by in the hallway. But now it's so cool to see guys that are out, doing the work, and so that's fantastic.
Next week we'll be. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please. Next week we'll be down in a church here in Texas, and a friend of mine who's pastoring in Texas now, and he just got voted as pastor of the summer. So it's exciting to see, guys that you may know well or not know well. Right. People. I say people. Sometimes the focus easily becomes on the guys that go a different direction or completely get out of church or never follow feel God's call in their life. Right. But it's awesome to see that there's guys that are doing what the Lord has called them to do.
I think it's so fun to know that these are the guys that will be friends for a lifetime. And you know how it was. And now, in slightly different ways, I grew up in a military family, and so we were all over the place. And so I never really had any, high school friends. Had some college friends and things, but even then I worked enough and was diligent enough of my studies that I didn't have as many friends as I maybe would have liked to. And maybe I just don't have any friends.
A man that has friends must show himself friendly.
You're exactly right. But now being in ministry, knowing that, you and guys like you will be those friends for a lifetime, though we may be separated, for the next 40 years, Lord willing, by the distance from here to Brazil for great portions of that. It's cool to be able to serve alongside, even geographically separate. That's a blessing. Talk through, maybe go backwards in time just a little bit. Talk through the burden to Brazil. When was that birthed in your heart and mind, and how did that come about?
Yeah. So I grew up, in a Christian home. I'm thankful for that. My parents were both saved in their early 20s, and then they met in Bible college, and then I'm one of four, the third of four. And I was saved as a 6-year-old boy. My dad led me to the Lord in our home, and then when I was 9, growing up in not only a Christian home but in a very missions minded church
Right.
and a missions minded home. I'm not. My parents never pushed me to ministry, never forced me into ministry, anything like that. But we were always serving the Lord together as a family, and I was always encouraged. And so we had a missionary when I was 9 that came, and he stayed. He stayed with our family during our church's missions conference, and he was on furlough at the time. And God, through his life and testimony, God began to really work in my heart about not only about the need for preaching, but especially specifically to Brazil. And
Sure.
so as a 9-year-old boy, I felt the call through the preaching through that week, and I felt the call to preach, felt the call to Brazil, and I surrendered. And it was funny, Micah, I've had not many, but through the years, I've had some say, well, boy, 9 years old, that's really young, to know exactly where the Lord would want you to go. And I always tell them, well, first of all, I didn't know exactly where the Lord wanted me to go, and I still don't. Obviously,
Sure.
we're headed in a direction. I feel like this is what I feel strongly about that, and the Lord's leading in that area toward Brazil and where we'll be and all that. But I don't know all the details from A to Z, and so it's just, day by day, trying to walk with the Lord, and definitely not perfect. As a teenager, did stupid things like any teenage guy would that's grown up in church. But try to have a heart to serve the Lord. And so the Lord still is calling, and I
love that. If I can jump in for just a second, I love that you parse that out a little bit, that you still don't know where God wants you. You're just on the journey, like getting there is half the fun.
The ultimate destination, sure.
Right. And we look for, I think we think of God's will as this point in space, the space-time continuum, like this is exactly where we're supposed to be. Right. But big picture, ultimately heaven. But along the way, we hear enough stories about people, heading gung-ho in one direction, and then God using them going where they were supposed to be, they thought, and then diverting them. And so I just love that you parse that out, that it's not about Brazil so much. It's about just doing what God wants you to do today and tomorrow and on down the road. Go ahead.
No, yeah, and I mean, our heart obviously is to go to Brazil and stay there for a lifetime. I know of many families there. I know of a lot of missionary families all around the world that have gone to their respective fields and are serving the Lord there and have been serving there for decades. I've heard it said before, that faithfulness isn't measured in years, it's measured in decades. Right. And I think that's such a great statement, and especially for guys our age, where it is. And I think the other thing we have to be careful of is trying to, I don't know how to say it, I guess, build a platform. And in other words, what I mean by that is, we're using, rather than allowing God to work in our life where we're at in the stage of life, we're trying to build a platform or a launching pad. There's nothing wrong with, I think we ought to, we ought to do our best and serve the Lord to the best of our ability. But we have to be careful that we're not looking always for a stepping stone. And rather than being content with where we're at, deputation is not something that I'm looking to do for the rest of my life. You doing what you're doing or about to step into, I don't envy that by any stretch, but you have to learn to be content with where you're at. And I think this is something that Jamie and I have talked about a lot since we started, is learning the lessons that the Lord has for us while we're here. Like I said, I don't know, we have some plans for our first term. We have some plans for the remainder of deputation. We have some goals we'd like to see done. But ultimately, our first priority is to bring honor and glory to the Lord and to follow his will. And, I feel strongly that's Brazil. I believe through counseling, through praying, through his word, that he's shown us that's Brazil. But I heard a pastor say this about a year ago. The world, the Bible says in the book of Matthew that the world is the field. And so the whole world needs the Lord. And I know that might sound almost rote or cliche, but it's true, because and I've said it so many meetings we've been at, 7.5 billion people on earth. And I've heard it estimated recently that almost half of that has never heard the gospel. And I recognize that I'm going to a country where, some would say, well, Brazil, they've got tons of missionaries and they've got tons of churches. And while Brazil does have a good number of missionaries, that does not negate, first of all, that does not negate the need. And secondly, that does not negate the following of the Lord's leading. You have to be where the Lord wants you to be.
Yes, sir.
And if that's in the middle of, quote, Bible Belt, United States, which we could argue I don't think really exists anymore today,
Sure.
Or in the back jungles of Vietnam, the need is great everywhere, and we need to be where the Lord wants us to be. And I don't remember what your original question was, but I'm sure I'm way off base of it now.
Hey. This is the thing I enjoy about this long form podcast conversational things. We can go wherever Lord takes us. And so that's exactly right, exactly. And we're good Baptists, so we can definitely do that pretty well.
Right. Yeah,
and
exactly.
that wascally wabbit. You're exactly right. And I think multiple statements in there that could definitely we could double back on. The thought about building your platform or your fiefdom, your kingdom, your empire instead of his. We get way off base. In times, I say we, and you know what I'm saying, but I do as well. We have a tendency to build our own, little. Here's what we have, and we think we just need to build our tower to heaven, instead of
building a personality. Yeah,
right.
Building a personality,
right?
And that's something that, if I may, and that's something Jamie and I have talked about a lot since we started Deputation. Because I have no idea. I can't speak to any experience for any other missionary or certainly any pastor or evangelist or anything like that. But I know in our case, the Lord has allowed us to be in some churches that not only have a heart for missions, but really have had a heart for us as individuals and have done some things that are
Amen.
Beyond just being kind. I mean, some things that people have done and pastors and churches have done for us. And so it's very simple. I say simple. It's very tempting, I think, sometimes, especially for a missionary. Again, my experience. Mm-hmm. It's very tempting for a missionary to go into a place and it's all about him. The pastor is excited to see you. It might be a church that doesn't. There's maybe I gotta be careful how I say this, but just maybe. The pastor is not as motivated as he once was, or maybe it is a church where it seems like it's just exciting and there's a lot of ministry, and every ministry is important. There's no such thing as a small church or a small pastor by any stretch, but you go into a place and people are happy to see you. They're excited about getting challenged in the area of missions. Mm-hmm. You go there, you many times have an opportunity to preach. Many times, usually always, you have an opportunity to present, whether that be a 5-minute or a 20-minute thing. And so it can become very self-centric.
Sure.
And so I have to be careful. We as a couple, we have to be careful that we don't go somewhere. And the term missionary, and I know a lot of pastors today resent that, but I'm afraid that sometimes we can get that mentality, and I'm sure I've been there. I'm young and immature, and I'm sure there's been times that I've been that sort of person. But I always want to be. We want to be a couple. We want to be a family that can serve and can help and really anyway, because it's not about us. Sure. It's not about we're going to be there for one service, but that pastor is going to be there for the next 52 Sundays, for the next, in the next 52 Wednesdays, through funerals, through the good times, through the bad times. And so it's not about us. We're thankful that the Lord allows us to partner with local churches and with pastors, but we want to keep in mind that we are. It's not all about us, and we are helping the church. It's a symbiotic relationship. The missionary and the church. We're fulfilling the Great Commission for them in Brazil, but they are fulfilling the Great Commission for us in anywhere USA. And so that's something that we try to be mindful of as we go, and just to be a help and be careful not to be so build our own. It can become all about us rather than focusing on the main thing, which is reaching people and, again, lifting up Christ and all that's said and done.
Absolutely. And this is tangentially related, and we'll double back to Brazil and all those things. But it's something, this gives me the opportunity to put some things on record that will either come back and bite me in the future, or just things I can, when someone asks me in the far future, why are you doing this? I can say, hey, I already referenced that, not because I need being historically right is helpful sometimes when people don't think you just thought of something off the top of your head. I have some background. Well, I enjoy social media and the usage of it, which is very funny because I was one of those guys 6, 7, not even 4 years ago that never used it. I think I technically had a Facebook account. Never used it. I don't even know if I had an Instagram account. Somehow I lucked out. I still got Micah McCurry. No dots, no hyphens, nothing. I was able to just get my name. I know, right? There's so many Micah McCurrys out there. I was able to get my name. But there are some plans that I have that, whether or not they have come to fruition, further using social media in a bigger way. And I realize perception's reality. And so this is what I would say that I'd like to be historically right on, if possible, is that I could see very easily how what I plan to do or what I do, even this, could be seen as being as trying to grow my own brand, if you want to call it that, whatever case may be. And people can have whatever opinion they want. I'm not going to lose any sleep about it. I don't say that in a hateful way. It just is what it is. But and I was talking to my wife about it, and I wanted to think of the big picture now so that I could answer the question whenever it comes up. Because there will always be those that second guess, and I appreciate criticism because there's always a grain of truth in there. But so the question being, why are you doing what you're doing, whether with this podcast or all the other things that I'd like to do here in the near future with the liberty of time and freedom I will have here in the near future in evangelism. And the answer to that question, and again, I'm kind of just putting this on record. It's somewhat related to what we're talking about, but I understand that I am not an unsaved person's cup of tea as far as who I am. I'm not going to reach. I think the day I start reaching unsaved people with my social media, I'll need to really examine what I'm doing on there, because it's
for the sole intent of having followers.
Right. And that's a very, what am I doing? How am I? Because in these days you have to be using the world's music to some almost. You have to be doing the world's dances. You have to be doing all those things. And so I see it though as with the amount of ministries and things that I really want to be a part of, and just like you have this ministry in mind in Brazil, I plan to use social media to raise awareness among saved people, among Christians, for the purpose of being able to direct more firepower at what I'd like to do. And so I think, but I will always need to be cognizant of, and this doubles back to what we're talking about, I will always need to be cognizant of, even though, and in Baptist terms, this is a lot. If I have 10,000 followers on Instagram, that's peanuts compared to most people. But if I have 10,000 followers on Instagram, the allure will be there to think that these people love me. These people, I post something, I just get so many likes that this is awesome. I must be doing something good. When in reality, it was only ever a tool to begin with.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's part of the allure of, call it the contemporary church, call it, it's the end, just very pragmatic. Hey, I'm reaching people, so it justifies my message, and not only my message, but more so it justifies my meat. And I think, and especially for guys our age where, social media influencers, and Jim and I crack up about this all the time. You ask a teenager or even a middle schooler, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to be a YouTuber. Like, come on, what is that? I mean, there's the one unicorn that's making 30,000 a week, with their videos, but that's just,
in reality, in brass tacks, the amount of work that you actually have to put into that. If you actually wanted to do that, I'm just talking practicalities. If you actually worked hard enough, that is not something to sneer at. That is a lot of work, a lot of creativity, all those things. But exactly the way we're talking about it, to where I want to be a YouTuber, so I'm going to post once a week. half baked, video. No. There's so much more that goes in behind the scenes that we don't realize. And you're exactly right. And I think all that to say, I think you're exactly right in that we need to be very careful, both in the physical as well as the digital world, that we get very self-centric. And it's so easy to do, because all it takes is some old lady at a church telling you, you are the greatest missionary that's ever been. We had Adoniram Judson in here 100 years ago, and you were so much better than he was. And you're like, I am pretty cool. And I don't anticipate getting all that many compliments on the evangelism trail. But when they do, when the people are too kind, and they are, then there's always, you have to deflect. You have to. And because as soon as you start believing it, I recall, that Roman Caesar or general or something, you're just a man or something. His servant walked behind him saying, you're just a man or something like that. While everyone's the adulation of the crowd. Anyway, I've let us off on that.
No, you're right, and I think, that's definitely an allure today. And I remember in Bible college in church ed hearing, let no man despise thy youth. Obviously, God created us who we are. God wants us to use who we are, where we're at, the talents and the gifts that He's given us for His glory. But we can't give just cause not only to the world. I mean, that pretty much goes without saying, but also you can't, you don't want to invalidate not necessarily who you are, but more so the message that we have, because it's not about me, it's not about you, it's about God's word. We understand that ultimately you don't want to invalidate that in the eyes of people that the Lord allows you to lead, pastor or lead to the Lord, a disciple, whatever that looks like, just because, I'm Keith Putnam and I've arrived in Brazil, and that's not reality. That's not
right. Reality. You're exactly right. I could talk the social media stuff and all those things for a long time, but so we kind of got to the call to Brazil, and again, to double back, it's so interesting with Bradley Kubik right before you as a very young man, we just talked about it. I think he was 11 or something like that. When he basically knew missions was the thing, and he came home and told his dad, who didn't go to church at the time, I'm going to be a missionary. And his dad basically tried to talk him out of it. And these are all the reasons that third world countries, and I do find it a little humorous when people say 9 years old, when we readily accept that 7-6-year-olds can get saved and accept Christ. But God can't lay on your heart that you're going to be a missionary. So that's a little bit of a double standard. So praise the Lord for you listening to that, but then also and having the support group of parents and a church and family that push that. So it takes us up to close to the present day. But the brass tacks of preparation, what did that look like even up to now? But what did that look like?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm often asked that question, by pastors, whether it be on questionnaire or in person or just offhanded. And sometimes they're taken a little aback. I'm thankful I had a good pastor, good youth pastor. I had, a good principal, went to Christian school, all of that invested in me. But I always tell them that, honestly, I did not learn ministry from, I learned public ministry in the sense of how to, to deal with people and pastor, by watching my pastor and looking at those examples. But in the personal work, soul winning, ministering to people, I did not learn that from my pastor. I learned that from my dad. And I mean, from a very young age, we started the church had a bunch of nursing homes that we'd go to. And I was, we had just moved out the church had moved 30 some miles and to where it's now at. And we had started going with another family when I was almost 4 when we started that. And we did that for years. In fact, my dad still preaches at a nursing home. He's been at the same one now it's a different one than we used to go to, but he's been there for probably, I would say maybe 15 years, maybe longer. I don't know exactly how long, but I mean, that's, every Sunday or every other Sunday, however the schedule was, we were there. We would sing, piano, instruments, preach, just talk with people, learning how to to deal with people. And I think nursing home ministry and I think bus ministry are two great, places to learn. It's not in the spotlight, it's not in the limelight, but they're people and they have real needs and they need the gospel. And many times those are, especially the elderly, are very forgotten.
Exactly.
And so it's a great place. So really, I mean, when it comes to ministry training, yes, I went to 4 years of Bible college and I did a lot of things, but we did it together as a family. And I think that's one of the things that Lord's really put on my heart. I'm very thankful for a pastor and a youth pastor that poured into me through the years and their example. Obviously, I mean, that's silly to say that, my dad was the only one that influenced me in that way. But a big part of the reason that for whatever I am, that the grace that God has allowed me to be today, a huge part of that goes to my parents, especially my dad and my parents in general, for modeling a good marriage, for a Christian walk, working hard. But then in ministry, my dad's an engineer. He's not a pastor, but we serve the Lord together as a family, going soul winning, singing. My brother and I, preaching opportunities, and I just, I'm very blessed without a doubt. And to whom much is given, much is required. I get that. And that's something that I have a burden for my children and also for the Lord, for the ones that the Lord allows me to influence again in through missions work, through pastoring and discipling them to, the church is very important. I believe strongly in the local church. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now on deputation if I did not believe in that. I believe strongly in it. However, I believe that the family is also extremely important. And obviously marriage starts with a strong marriage, but then also a husband and wife pulling together in the same direction. It may not always be easy, but it's right. And you will not have, I was talking with a pastor probably about 6 or 7 months ago, and he said that he's never seen on fire. I believe his quote was, "I've never seen on fire adults come from lukewarm homes." And I thought that was interesting. Either it comes from a home that's really on fire for the Lord or really cold. And, obviously I'm nothing and I have a long ways to go before the story of my life is written. But I'm thankful for parents, not perfect, but I'm thankful for parents that really not only believed, but practiced biblical Christianity on a day-to-day basis. Amen. And I think that's a huge part of it. If you have a teenager or a kid who's expressed the call of God in their life or has, been asking about that, you don't have to push them into ministry. The Lord will work in their hearts. The Lord will use your pastor. The Lord will use spiritual authorities in their life to guide them, and obviously through His Word. But foster that relationship with that ministry and give them an opportunity to serve and give them an opportunity to get their hands dirty and learn what it's like, and not on a day-to-day basis, but learn how to deal with people and right. to relate to people, because that's the ministry. That people are the ministry. Sorry, I messed up my English there, but yeah, but anyways, I mean, that's the reality of it. And so when it comes to training, yes, I went to Bible college, went on missions trips and did all of those things that are important. But I think the home, the training I received at home and the ministry that we did together as a family is without a doubt just left a indelible mark that I'm forever grateful for.
Amen. Now, and I want to jump back and clarify something. You said that pastor mentioned he's never seen on-fire adults come from a lukewarm home, meaning that he's never seen someone that ended up as an adult on fire come out of a lukewarm home that they were in as a teenager, or clarify that for me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the moment it was it worked great, and maybe that's not right, because obviously,
well, no, because the thought I had was, thinking back, I'm trying to think of people I know of that ended up as adults on fire for God, that came from lukewarm, and I'm sure there's exceptions everywhere and all those things. But really, if that's the way that's meant, that's a pretty powerful statement and rings pretty true. That's goad, that's a prick, hopefully, a conviction to parents that allow their home to be in any way lukewarm spiritually. So I think there's because I think if you look at, like you said, from ice cold homes, sometimes there are teenagers that end up coming out of that and end up doing amazing things for God. But the lukewarm homes seem to be a black hole of spirituality oftentimes. I think you're right on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and of course you can't negate personal responsibility. Right. I think that, but I would agree that when he said that, I immediately you begin to run the index of who's who.
Unfortunately,
and you think about it and say, man, not necessarily that you knew what the home was like, but looking back, you say, okay, possibly. And again,
well, I think to even negate the fact that we know.
Sure.
God gave us such an amazing ability to read things. And it's funny. I have to think I've been in ministry 5.5 years, like nothing compared to like Pastor Grimaldi pushing, 40 years in ministry. Right. And so I realized this small bit of discernment I have that I've worked and gleaned and unfortunately that's been forced on me because of situations and things of the ministry. I think, I have some sort of sixth sense or whatever. But then I realize as a teenager, I could go back. If you put me back in my body as a 15-year-old, I could guess who was going to make it in the Christian life, much less just ministry, just Christianity at all. Mm-hmm. And I could probably sit here and be right on both times. I look back and I can tell you who, and I can go back then and tell you who. And that's not a knock. That's not. I'm not downing anybody. But we know it's pretty easy to figure out. Out of the, I realize this all the time. Out of the issues of the heart, the mouth speaketh, and you act out of the issues of the heart. Just what you do, it comes out so easily. And simple things like missing, a church responsibility, missing a church service. It just tells everybody exactly where you're at. But I'll let you finish. I apologize.
Well, I was going to say, to me, as much as anything. It's a warning in my life, in my parenting. And I'll tell you, I mean, that's a whole other topic that we could chase, just parenting. Obviously, I've got some great examples in my life, obviously my parents, but then others, that in our church and that I know. And, I don't want to say scary because I recognize that, sin has always been around. Sin is still sin.
Sure.
Perhaps we could argue that access to sin today is perhaps a little more attainable. It's a little bit easier now. Maybe we could argue that. But sin is still sin. And Satan, his wiles, his traps are nothing new. And I can sit here and say, that a teenager or an adult that's on fire for the Lord has never come from a lukewarm home, and I can know that. I can know the truth of that. I can have seen the examples of that, and then walk away and live a life of lukewarmness.
Right.
Be on the outside, be in churches, preach, go soul winning, and do all of the externals that I'm quote supposed to do, and be a complete failure in an area that's secret, in an area that only really I know, the Lord knows how I'm really doing. And so just a challenge to me to be faithful in the little things, be faithful in the little details of life. And that is definitely a struggle that I have. And I'm just maybe being a little real, but that is definitely something that I struggle with just on a day-to-day basis. Because it's so easy to get so caught up again in the moment, caught up in what the Lord has, that the here and the now, it impacts the 20 and the 30 years from now as well. Right. And just being mindful of that.
Yeah. But, and I want to again double back for just saying it on what you said about nursing home and those ministries and things having such a huge impact. And I love that you point out that really that was the proving ground, even more so than all of these other things. And I'll say this, and this is not a knock against Bible college and all that sort of stuff, but I think too often many churches put the responsibility for the training of their youth off onto the Bible college. Basically our goal is only to get them to 18 years old without any major mess ups, and we'll ship them off and they will put the finishing touches on, or actually lay foundational building blocks is what they expect. And that's not a wise way to go about it. They're still your youth. They're still your kids to a degree. And so and it seems many of the churches, such as Northwest Bible Baptist and others that have the Bible college, do an excellent job of training their kids before they even get to Bible college. The school that has the church that has the Bible college doesn't just trust the Bible college to do their work for them. And so obviously the fact that the church you went to had a nursing home ministry, all those things gave you outlets for ministry. And it spoke to me because that was nursing home was where I cut my teeth. That was some of the first messages I preached. You get the opportunity to preach to these folks. And the first one of the ones we went to, it's still to this day the nicest nursing home I've probably ever been to. And so it's all been downhill from there. And those of you that know nursing homes, those of you that know nursing homes, we can joke and laugh about it, and it's not in a mean way or anything like that. Just understand, most nursing homes, if you've never been to one, let me tell you, please minister and go and be a part of them, because those folks are some of our ministry here at First Baptist Kenmore is called Friends of Forgotten People. That's what we call it, because exactly what you said, that they are some of the most forgotten people. You go in there and there's 100, 200, 300 residents in there, and I walk the halls and I see 1 or 2 children or brother or sister, someone isn't in the nursing home visiting with them. And we come in once a week, once a month, once every couple of weeks. And I will say this, and this is not cliche, this is the factual truth. I walk in every time thinking, I need to be a blessing to these people. I need to be an encouragement. And you always walk out more encouraged. I don't know if it's just God giving you, hey, you're ministering to some of my people, some of those beggars, those without shoes, those are clothed, those that weren't clothed, need to drink water, those type of people. And so I'm just going to give you a little something for that. I don't know if it's that or what it is, but I am always encouraged walking out. And it should be the most discouraging place ever. And it's so awesome. And so let me say this to those at First Baptist of Kenmore and everywhere else. I'll look directly at the camera. Get involved with a nursing home. If your church doesn't have a nursing home ministry, it's one of the lowest impact ministries as far as time investment and all those things. You could start with just once a month, and I guarantee you will be the hero there at the nursing home. And it's such... And again, as you said, it's such a great place for families to serve together. It's absolutely. Just, I cannot recommend nursing homes. And you say, well, if the goal is to just see mass quantities of people saved, then don't go to nursing homes. Sure. Then that's not the place to see 40 people saved in one fell swoop. But can I tell you, God blesses it. I just know it just in my very bones that God blesses that. And so I love that you mentioned that. But that concept of serving together as family, and I have no problem getting into family and parenting and all that stuff, but that idea of making it a family deal for us, for the McCurry family, church was a family thing. It wasn't something mom did. It wasn't something dad did. It wasn't something for the kids. And just as well as I do, running buses and things, the huge uphill battle that these kids face when church is just a babysitting service for the kids on Sunday. The statistics as well as I do, it's such a minuscule amount that will ever have a chance just because mom and dad aren't interested in any way. And so the fact that families leading and working together results in, and those of you that are watching understand what I'm saying. you understand that it's not pat me or Keith on the back, but they result in people like Keith and people like me who have a desire to serve God with their lives full time. And
Right.
and though he and I are nothing to write home about, we're at least doing our best.
Right.
And where we put ourselves in that position. So I appreciate that thought. But
yeah.
So continue on wherever you'd like to jump in there.
No, I mean, I definitely agree as to the point of serving the Lord together as a family. I think sometimes it's not. There's no the family and the church are not at odds. There's no. I don't know why some people feel that way. I have known, not that they feel that they're at odds, but that perhaps they're trying to achieve two different goals. Sure. I love what my pastor has said time and time again. He's devoted a lot of his ministry to preaching on marriage, family, and the home. And I heard it recently elsewhere as well. You know, I think sometimes we get into this mindset, the goal of being, let's raise good kids. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with raising good kids. But my goal is not to raise good kids. My goal is to raise godly kids. And further, I'm not looking, and this is something that I've really thought about more recently. You know, they're only going to be kids for a short while, but they're going to be an adult, Lord willing, for a long time. Right. And their influence as an adult is most likely. Now, I know we live in 2019 where kids can get on YouTube and, you know, become a sensation yelling at the top of their voice about anything. It's ridiculous. But in normal, polite society, your influence from age, we'll just say 18 to whenever you take your last breath, will be infinitely greater than the first 18 years of your life. So, yes, the goal is to raise good and godly kids, but I would take it a step further and say that my goal ought to be to try and raise godly adults. And that doesn't start, and it kind of goes back to what you were talking before, just about the family and serving the Lord together as a family. And there's no, the church and the family are not at odds. We ought to have the same goal of, yes, first of all, rearing our children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, obviously. And again, by no means am I an authority on this, because today, probably about an hour ago, I was.
Wasn't this the place to announce that you and I are co-authoring a book on parenting?
Oh yeah, sure.
And we just know it. I mean, we have 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and I think we're probably squared away on this.
In about 4 seconds. I don't even think it'll make it through the first printing for the first chapter. An hour ago, I was not modeling this at all, probably. But the goal is, I'm trying to raise my children to be godly adults, and so that looks very different than just telling my kid no because I said so. That's instilling in them, hopefully instilling in them some biblical values. Also some common sense values, just work ethic, something that's lost in today's society for many kids and teenagers. Just instilling more than just because I said so, or this is what we do because you're in my house. Yes, my kids will live by my rules, but there's got to be. We have to look to the future. We have to understand we're not just rearing our children. We're influencing generations to come by our example. And that's evident in my family through the years. And I think that many times we get the wrong goal in view. And yes, of course, I want to have kids that are well behaved. I mean, yes, because as a parent, I want to save face, right? And I don't want to be embarrassed. But at the same time, sometimes that's a hard process, and rearing them in the nurturing and admonition of the Lord should be our ultimate goal, and not just for today, not for the next, not through 12th grade, but so that when they get married, they're able to take those biblical values, not my values, but biblical values that I've been able to instill in them and instill those as husband and wife, implement those together in their family and teach their children there. And you have totally random. You have a spider. I think I'm on the other side of you. No, look the other way. You have a spider crawling down. You see it? It's like eye level right now. I don't know where distance. I have no.
Let's see. That's the first on the podcast.
I can. It's very clear on the camera, but you may. I have no idea where it's at.
Well, as long as it's not a poisonous one. If it is, just call 911.
I have no depth perception, so it's climbing up right now.
It's climbing up. It's still there though.
It's still. I can still see it in the camera view, but very random. I know, but
no. I appreciate this. Aha! I see it.
Yeah.
How did you see that? That's incredibly small. Wow. There it is, right there. Can everybody see it now? No. Oh, they can't see on there because we're split frame, and so people can't see it. So everyone has a home.
Oh, so I sound like a crazy guy then.
No. But I see it. It really exists, and unfortunately, the spider has to go bye now. And there we go. It was a very tiny one. But no, you're not crazy. It was there. Keith asked earlier about this setup behind me. This is actually my basement office, and so it's unfinished. Well, it's semi-unfinished above me and things. And so I have friends that visit me every once in a while, and he was just one of them. And so I appreciate you pointing that out before actually, you prevented me from becoming Spider-Man, and so I'm.
Oh well, that's good because there's we can't get into that. That universe has gone on far too long, but that's an argument for a different time. It was getting way too serious, so no.
Exactly. We need Spider. Thank you for giving your life so that we could go to easier things. He was so small. I don't even know where he went now. He's gone. Well, he was there, and now he's gone. Right. So I appreciate you saving my life, though. But getting this back on track away from Mr. Spider here. Talk about family. Talk about Brazil, and you're actually the second missionary to Brazil. I've actually had Mike Schmidt on episode 21 or something like that, somewhere around there. And so we got into the geography of Brazil and all those things with him a little bit. But maybe if we can talk, I actually do want to go back to for just a second what you're saying, but parenting with the big picture in mind. I love that thought. Trying to do everything with a big picture in mind, and yet, yes, you can zoom all the way out to the glory of God and all those things. But when you think about the fact that you're raising someone's wife or someone's husband, a future pastor or fireman or whatever God has for them, instead of just trying to raise someone who you will get along with right now, or someone that will do what you tell them to right now.
That's very tempting,
right. And that's it's tempting, but it's also the instant gratification thing.
Absolutely.
And I maybe that's where it's not a bad intention. It's not it's not done, ill-intentioned when people try to raise their children to be their friend. Because if your child is your friend, for most people, that means they will be well-behaved. They will be respectful to a degree, and all those things. But when you're thinking that small, that you're just trying to raise a friend, and you're not trying to think of a future member of society, the next generation of your church, all those things, that really changes. Because when you raise your child as if you're raising someone's husband or someone's father, future, someone's wife, all those things, you'll probably end up with a respectful, well-adjusted, well-behaved child. That's a byproduct of it. So shoot for the bigger one. And then you're reminded of the Bible saying, children are as arrows. They're meant to be released, and they're very powerful. And as you said, the potential is not here. The potential is downrange when it meets its target. And so raising them for the purpose of trying to do something right here and now, that's like trying to sword fight with an arrow. It's not meant for that. It's meant to go down range and impact a target a long way away. And so I think you're exactly right with that. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about your upbringing, talked a little bit about Brazil. We've talked about all things philosophy, spirituality. We've just cleared up everything as far as family and all of that. Pastor Gomez probably doesn't need to preach anymore on family because we've got this thing nailed down.
Yeah, right.
Just listen to this; it'll take care of all that. But I do know that at some point missionaries do need to sleep, and so I think I realize there are many of these that we only just like scratch the surface on one or two things, and we could definitely double back at some point in the future. But I also always like to ask, with the thousands of people that I'm sure are watching right now, wink, wink, what would you say, if you have a billboard you could place anywhere, or, that everybody would see, shout from the mountaintops, what would be a final thought for this evening that you'd pass along?
Final thought. Well, I guess just keeping it in the vein of what we've been discussing on, I just want to be an encouragement. I doubt there's any kids or teenagers watching this. You better be in bed. It's past curfew. I don't even know that stuff anymore. But I would say that get to a position where the Lord could speak to you, and I recognize that you're in church. I recognize that you're probably in a good place, but put yourself in that place, postured to hear the voice of the Lord. A verse that the Lord kind of has been working in my heart, I believe it's Psalm 29:4. I believe it's 29:4, 24:9. I can't remember which order it is, but the verse is this: the voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. And this is a very simple thought, but I really am. Jamie and I talk about it all the time. As crazy as deputation is, and as crazy as our life is right now, we really are living our dream. And I know that, again, that can be very cliche. That can be very rote. And usually people say it with a wink and a nod and a lot of sarcasm. But I'm serious. I am living the life that God has called me to. I'm not perfect, but living the dream. And that's because I made a choice years ago to listen to the voice of the Lord. The voice of the Lord is powerful. And the voice, when we listen to God's voice, when we listen to his dealing in our lives, it's powerful, because he will do things in your life that you will have never. It will take you places, give you opportunities, bring you across the paths of people you would have never imagined you would have had the opportunity to meet and to do and to see, and all of that. But then it's full of majesty. It's full of glory, and the life that's lived for Christ is the best life. It doesn't pay the most. It's not the most secure financially or health-wise or location-wise or relationally with family, but it is the best life. And I can tell you that, I'm kind of bringing us back to where we started. No idea what the future holds, but I can tell you that I'm excited about it because I know that as day by day, just one step at a time, that's what it's all about. And I recognize that was more of a full page in the New York Times and a billboard.
Hey,
but
no, just fine print on a billboard. You can fit a lot of text on there. You might not be able to see it going by at 70 miles an hour, but it doesn't have to be that.
Take the time to read it. Just an encouragement to young people.
Absolutely. And two thoughts I'll dovetail with that before we finish up. One being that, and you'd mentioned you don't necessarily envy what I'm going into here with evangelism because I know what you're saying, because it probably reminds you too much of what you've experienced over the last 2 years and just the craziness, which for me, and maybe in 2 years I'll feel differently, but for me, I think the exact same way, that I'll be living the dream, and part of me, I enjoy the chaos a little bit, so that part is fun. But God built me that way, and so maybe that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. But so that it's amazing to see, God place people where they're supposed to be and the passions that they have, and so that's always fun. But the other thought of placing yourself where you can hear and experience and get a hold of God. The thought that came to mind was there's these protests going on, some different things. because on I don't know what they call it, Big Mountain or whatever it's called, in Hawaii. Is it Oahu? I don't know what it is. My Hawaii geography is not great. Anyway, they want to put another huge telescope on this mountain. They're getting some flack from some native groups and things that feel like they have too many up there. It's sacred ground to them and all that.
Sure.
But regardless, why do they need to put it on this particular place there in Hawaii? Well, it's because that's what gives them the best access to the wonders of the universe.
Right.
And yet we get so uppity and so distraught, or I would say defensive, maybe is the word, when we're told there's a specific place or there's a specific way to approach, and there's a specific dress, and there's a specific, you name it, that puts you in a better position. And this is not a work salvation thing, and anyone that's listening, I think we all know that. But physically speaking, we understand that there are things that we can do to get better reception, whether it be with the cell phone or whatever the case may be. But we don't think the same spiritually speaking. We think we can do and be and act however we want, and it's not going to affect our ability to get reception from God. And so that was the only thought I dovetail on with that. You're exactly right. If our sole goal in life was to hear from God and put ourselves in the best position to, we do a lot better job reaching the world. I would hazard a guess. And so I appreciate it. We are sitting on, let me see here. Let me just check. We are sitting on 55 minutes. And those of you that are watching, I greatly appreciate it. And I should have said this earlier, but if you're watching right now, if you wouldn't mind, I think we have a couple people watching on Facebook right now, maybe one or two on YouTube, all that. If you wouldn't mind, take a moment and share this. There is definitely a lot said, mostly from that side of the camera, Brother Keith. That would be, I think, a help. And I've been helped personally with each one of these, just being able to hash out and talk and think things through, and being able to put down for posterity, I guess. I'm excited about the fact that because the internet never dies, the internet, records everything. The fact that my kids will be able to come back and watch these someday. When Dad was how old? He was that young at one time. Being able to experience that, I think will be cool. And I realize this is number 38. I'm sitting on almost a work week, almost 40 hours worth of content of these so far, which is just pretty cool. But if you would maybe hit the share button, like or something like that. But those of you that, I'm not big on sharing things, I completely understand. I'm not either. But maybe if you would, those of you watching, share this with just one person that you think it might be a help to. Text it to them, Facebook message it to them, and to be a help that way. Any last words, Brother Putnam, before we sign off here in a moment?
No, if I give any more words, we'll be going for another 55. So we're
I appreciate it, man. Hey, thanks so much for being on. Stick around for just a second. We'll sign off here. We have, I think the schedule on the website, MicahMcCurry.com, says I have Kyle England later tonight. But I was texting with Brother Kyle earlier, I think yesterday, and he's actually going to be in town for our God Bless America Youth Summit coming up. And we figured we need to do an episode of Micah McCurry Eats, where we go to a restaurant, and we're going to do that episode live. And so that will come to you maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. It will not be tonight, so the schedule is wrong. I apologize about that. But those of you that are watching, greatly appreciate it. And as I said so many times, it's not about you. It's this. I do this for me. I enjoy it. And so, but I appreciate you listening in. And if this can be a help to somebody else, please share it with them. Let them know. Brother Keith, thanks so much. We will sign off here in just a moment. This has been Micah McCurry Live, number 38, with Brother